Today we're talking about someone whose name became almost synonymous with classic Hollywood glamour, Lauren Bacall. Even decades after her greatest films, her face, her voice, and that unmistakable look continue to appear in classic movie clips, photographs, interviews, and retrospectives. But Lauren Bacall was never simply a beautiful actress from Hollywood's golden age. There was something sharper behind the glamour, something confident and intelligent that made her stand apart from the beginning. And what's fascinating is that she wasn't even trying to become the legend people eventually saw. Before we get into today's story, take a moment to subscribe. She was simply a young woman with big ambitions who happened to be discovered at exactly the right moment. Let's go back. Born Betty Joan Persky in New York City in 1924, Bacall grew up with dreams of becoming an actress. She studied at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts and worked as a model before Hollywood came calling. Then, in 1943, something happened that would completely change the direction of her life. Her photograph appeared on the cover of Harper's Bazaar, where it caught the attention of Nancy Hawks, the wife of director Howard Hawks. Hawks saw something in the young model and brought her to Hollywood for a screen test. She was only 20 years old when she landed her first major film role, opposite Humphrey Bogart in To Have and Have Not. And almost immediately, Hollywood had a new star. Her character, Marie Slim Browning, wasn't written as an ordinary romantic lead. Bacall brought an unusual combination of confidence, mystery, and controlled sensuality to the role. Then came that famous whistle scene, a moment that would become part of cinema history. The performance transformed Bacall almost overnight. The industry gave her a nickname that captured her image perfectly: the Look. But here's the thing. Bacall's appeal was never just about appearance. She had timing, she had presence, and she had a voice that audiences could recognize within seconds. More importantly, she knew how to hold her own opposite powerful actors, including Bogart. Their chemistry on screen was undeniable, but what happened away from the cameras became an even bigger story. Bogart was 25 years older than Bacall, and despite the difference, the two fell deeply in love during the production of their first film together. Their relationship became one of Hollywood's most famous romances, and they eventually married in 1945. They would go on to appear together in several iconic films, including The Big Sleep, Dark Passage, and Key Largo. Their partnership wasn't simply a publicity story. They became a genuine family, and Bacall later described Bogart as one of the most important people in her life. But Hollywood had a habit of putting women into boxes, especially women who became famous for their beauty. Bacall refused to stay inside one. She continued taking on different kinds of roles, gradually proving that she was much more than the glamorous young woman audiences first discovered in the 1940s. She worked with some of the biggest names in cinema and appeared in films such as How to Marry a Millionaire, Written on the Wind, The Shouldest, and Murder on the Orient Express. She also found another stage on which to demonstrate her talent, Broadway. In 1970, she won her first Tony Award for Applause, a musical adaptation of All About Eve, taking on the role of Margot Channing, the character originally played on film by Bette Davis. It was another reminder that Bacall's career couldn't be reduced to one era or one medium. She wasn't simply surviving after the golden age of Hollywood. She was continuing to reinvent herself. But then came one of the most painful chapters of her life. Humphrey Bogart died of cancer in 1957, leaving Bacall a widow at only 32 years old. They had been married for just over a decade, and his death profoundly affected her. Yet she continued raising their children and building a career of her own. Over the following decades, she kept working, appearing in films and on stage while maintaining the distinctive personality that had made her famous. And perhaps that's one of the most impressive things about Lauren Bacall. She never seemed interested in becoming a copy of the young woman Hollywood had once created. She allowed herself to age. She allowed her career to change. She became more outspoken, more experienced, and increasingly respected for her intelligence as much as her appearance. Her autobiography, By Myself, published in 1978, became a bestseller and won the National Book Award in 1980. Suddenly, audiences weren't only hearing Lauren Bacall speak through her movie characters. They were hearing her own voice, telling the story of her life in her own words. And she continued working well into her later years. In 1996, more than 5 decades after her film debut, she received an Academy Award nomination for her supporting performance in The Mirror Has Two Faces. Think about that for a moment. She had gone from being a 20-year-old newcomer, discovered through a magazine cover, to an established Hollywood legend still receiving major recognition more than 50 years into her career. Then in 2009, the Academy finally gave her one of cinema's highest honors, an honorary Academy Award for her extraordinary lifetime achievement in motion pictures. By then, Lauren Bacall wasn't simply remembered as the young actress who starred opposite Humphrey Bogart. She had become an institution in her own right. Her career had stretched across generations, from the classic studio era to modern cinema, with more than 30 films and major work on Broadway. She appeared in films such as Misery and Dogville later in her career, proving once again that she had no intention of disappearing simply because the era that made her famous had changed. And that's what makes her story so fascinating today. When people see Lauren Bacall in an old photograph, it's easy to see only the glamour, the perfectly styled hair, the confident expression, the legendary stare. But behind that image was a woman who experienced enormous change, devastating loss, professional uncertainty, motherhood, reinvention, and decades of hard work. She survived the end of the studio system that had helped create her. She watched Hollywood transform around her, yet somehow remained relevant without constantly chasing relevance. On August 12, 2014, Lauren Bacall died at the age of 89 after a remarkable life and career. She left behind not just a collection of classic films, but a standard of screen presence that is still difficult to reproduce. Her voice remains recognizable. Her performances remain watchable. And that famous look still has the power to stop a scene before she even says a word. Maybe that's why Lauren Bacall continues to matter. She wasn't famous simply because she was beautiful, and she wasn't remembered simply because she appeared in some of Hollywood's greatest films. She became unforgettable because she had something that couldn't be manufactured: presence. She knew who she was, she knew what she brought to the screen, and she refused to let one chapter of her life define the entire story. Some stars belong to a particular generation. Lauren Bacall somehow belongs to all of them. Because the photographs may belong to the past, the movies may be decades old, and the Hollywood that created her may be gone, but that voice, that confidence, and that unmistakable look still remain. And perhaps that's the real definition of a Hollywood legend. Not someone who simply becomes famous, but someone whose presence refuses to disappear.